Okay, welcome back to the Chasing Tone podcast. I'm Frank.
I'm Max.
I'm Brian.
And we are here to answer more of your questions. Let's dive right in.
Hashtag new dad.
Hashtag new dad.
No, I'm not.
He still hasn't answered me about two Christmases. I want
You
two
can
birthdays
see why
now.
I wanted to dive right in. Here we go. Okay.
So I
Yeah.
want a train set. So
Yeah,
I'm just
I
saying,
know.
if I don't get a train set,
I won't tell
I'm gonna
people
throw
about
a
your
fit.
drinking.
Yeah, I'm going to hold your breath. till you turn-
I am.
Yeah.
Hold my breath. All right. So from the Facebook page, from our tone group page.
From the Facebook?
From the Facebook page.
Yeah, because that's what all the kids are calling it.
It's www.facebook.com.
Right.
At least when I signed up, that's what it was.
Yeah, it's true.
They changed it.
No, it was not.
I
Get out of
know,
here.
I know. Okay, so
See, you can't do it.
I'm lightheaded.
Yeah, and now you still don't have a train and you're lightheaded.
I know. If you're a better dad, I already have one.
okay, so from Facebook on our tone group, it says, it's from Chris Carter. Explain ohms, mainly regarding heads to speakers to us lame people who don't understand electronics no matter how hard we try. So I'm going to explain it like I would explain it to like one of my children, right? So,
Tell us, Dad.
And so it's not going to, so to like all the engineers out there, like Jake Steffes is watching this going,
Yeah.
oh, huge facepalm.
Yeah,
No,
why are you don't say it like that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
That's
you're
not
taking
it.
amplitude into,
Right,
whatever.
right. There's
So-
that's the resistance at the peak load of the speaker. It's not even 8 ohms.
So let
I
me
will know
explain
no difference here.
resistance.
By the way, I'm not
in
imitating Jake. Right. That's
Right.
that is just the engineer, right? The
You'd have to dance.
stereotypical
Dance more.
engineer
Jake.
/ Star Trek nerd.
This is after he's like
You know.
hits his calculator. Like,
Right.
wait a minute.
Right. Actually, in parallel, it's 4.62. All right.
Okay, it's Chris
buddy.
Carter. Chris, resistance. Okay, ohms. Ohms are, let's call it water, and let's say we're talking about what you can do with ohms, which is resist ohms. So if I have a hose and I kink it up, that water there's more resistance there. So it's like can't get through that bend.
Right. So instead of a bunch of water coming out the garden hose,
Right.
it's actually now been turned into more of a trickle.
Yes.
And there's less water coming out the other side. You've actually reduced the velocity. There's less coming out. And I'm saying,
Yes.
I'll tell you later why I'm setting it up that
Right.
way, but go ahead. Right.
Right. So yeah, that's a resistor.
Right.
And your water hose turn off, that's a pot
Right. Where it's a variable
where you can change
resistor.
that resistance.
So I can open up the floodgates or I can scale it back.
Yep.
Right. And so then when you're talking about like a load, now if you're talking about in the back end, like a speaker, right?
Right.
I like to think of it as the resistive load of the speaker is almost like the size of the garden hose.
Right.
In other words, let's pretend now we're talking about AC current. We're talking about current going to the speaker, so we're not really talking about kinking it or resisting it or whatever.
Right.
We're just talking about there's electricity. It's coming out your amp. It's just coming out the back end of the amp, and it's going to hit the speaker. And that's basically like you could have the same amount of water, but if it's coming out of a really tiny garden hose, it's going to shoot out with a high degree of force.
Fire hose, if you will.
Right. If you had just as much water that was coming out of a fire hose, but instead now you have an 8-inch pipe
Right.
or a 10-inch pipe, that means there's less resistance to that water.
Right.
And it's not going to build up the pressure. So now you're back to like trickling out. And the reason you want the right kind of load for your amp, you want the same impedance, you want to match those two up, 8 ohm head, 8 ohm cab,
Yeah.
is because that's the most efficient way of getting those two things to communicate with one another. Right.
Now you can use, a 16 ohm cab.
Right.
with
You
8
can go
ohms.
with a bigger hose.
Right.
And then have like trickling water. So like if you have an 8 ohm amp and you run into a 16 ohm cab, you're going to give up actually some decibels in doing that. It's going to get not as loud because it's not as, it's not, efficiency is kind of the word we want to use, but it's just, it's not coming out without much punch,
Right.
with as much force. And what you don't want to do is go the other way, 8 ohm head, 4 ohm or
Right.
2 ohm speaker load.
That's like watering your garden with a fire hose.
Well, but yeah, and to the point where, because you're pushing back on the amp with
Right.
so much resistance, you can be doing damage to your amp, right?
Or your garden.
Right. Yeah. That, okay, so I'm glad you held your breath like a 2-year-old 5 minutes ago, because and, an 8 ohm head into a
Trying to
4 or
get a
2
word in
ohm
here.
cab is kind of like, right?
I'll
So
do it
your
again.
your head could I use the term literally because I love when people misuse that term.
Right.
Your head could literally explode. No, but but you can do damage to your amp in that direction. You won't do it in damage to your amp or your speaker in the other direction.
Right.
Smaller number on the amp, bigger number at the cabinet.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. That's right. Except if you're using a tube amp, always make sure you have a cabinet hooked up.
And then wait, hang on. So what's these? Blah blah blah. Okay, but so here's the thing.
Mm-hmm.
So explaining ohms, right? This guy Chris says mainly regarding heads to speakers.
Right.
And then I'm going to say, Chris, I think you also might have meant for me to explain it in other areas as well.
Sure.
No, but you just didn't know you were asking that question. But, when it comes to when we're talking about these amps, it's like it's amplitude. Some people say the tone changes when you change the impedance loading on the amp, and that's true too, because again, it's not, it's hitting in a different way if you're sort of under loading your amp with a larger speaker cap. It's like you might see a change in the mid-range frequency characteristics or whatever, because those loads are at their highest point at the resonant peak frequencies,
Right.
or whatever. It's throughout the frequency response curve. The resistance actually changes a little bit.
Yep.
When it comes to guitar pickups, and pedals, this is where I don't think people really get into this stuff unless they're geeking out. But the input impedance of a specific pedal, and this would be mainly the first pedal in your chain, is important, because if that input impedance is lower or smaller, it will actually start to interact and change the sound of your pickup. Mm-hmm. So if you have a pedal that has a 1 mega ohm load up front, that's what we would call wide open.
Right.
There's a pedal with a 4 ohm, like the Layla has a switcher that'll jump all the way up to 4 megs, But there's, if you're up at 1 meg, that's kind of like wide open. Your guitar is going to sound like your guitar. It's going to sound like, it's just basically free to pass into the circuit. If the input load is down at 470, maybe there's a little shift.
Right.
And anything lower than that, and I am,
You start noticing.
you
big time
really,
tone
yeah. I'm not a fan of heavily loading a guitar pickup, a passive pickup. No, we're mainly talking about passive pickups, because when you do that, you really change the character of the pickup. It's like adding a bunch more, a couple more potentiometers to your guitars,
Right.
To your circuit. Like you have a Strat and you put 2 volumes and 3 tones on it. By the time those things stack up with resistive loading, they start to change the way you hear the pickups.
Right. Like,
It
for
knocks
example, if I have a
resonant peak
guitar
down.
and I disconnect my tone control, that changes the sound of my guitar.
Yeah, that opens it up a little
Yeah.
bit. And so that's another area where you should be concerned about a spec on a page. Hey, I'm researching some pedals. Let me go look at what the input impedance is of this thing.
Right.
And if it's trying to emulate, if the pedal you're looking at is trying to emulate a tube screamer, then maybe they're going to have the input impedance higher because they're telling you that's a better, or maybe it's going to be exactly the same as a tube screamer because it's supposed to be like a tube screamer,
Right.
And a fuzz pedal is going to have a different load, maybe less or whatever. But if you have a low impedance pickup, if you have active pickups, and they're coming out low impedance, then they become a little bit more deaf to that. And that doesn't really matter what the input impedance is
It's not quite so sensitive.
as much, yeah. And again, the same thing happens with a buffer. So if you're going to use a pedal as a buffer, do you want to disclose? You list your input impedance of the dB?
I
Plus-
think it's a meg input and
Yeah.
10K or so out.
Yeah, so if you're going into that with a 1 meg, that means the sound of your guitar is totally preserved. If it's passive pickup, your guitar is totally, you know what I mean? It's like totally preserved tone coming out of your guitar. But with the buffer on, or with it on, the pedal on and being boosted, whether it's boosted or not, the output of that pedal is now really low, which means doesn't matter what's coming after it. Your guitar signal, that's why your guitar is going to sound like your guitar, and the signal is going to be preserved.
Exactly.
So thank you, Chris, for almost asking that question.
Let me ask you this question. I already know the answer, but I want to ask you this question. What's your opinion?
Max and see if we get a funny answer.
See how smart you are. I already know the answer, but see if you know the answer.
Let me see how much you know pickup, man.
Right.
I said in class.
I know the square root of, whatever, but do you? Go ahead.
Okay, so a question we always get is, do I need a buffer at the front and a buffer at the back?
Right.
If I'm being far-fetched, I'm running 150 feet of cable. Do I need another buffer somewhere in there?
Right.
So my thought is, no, you really could probably get away with one, unless you have another pedal at the end that's screwing with impedance in some way on the output.
Right.
You need one really good buffer, though.
Right. Yeah.
Not a poorly made buffer like some other companies offer.
I prefer op-amp
major pedal stores. So. That was what I'm talking about.
Major what?
A major pedal store. You don't want their buffers. You want a quality made buffer.
Right. I'm of the school of thought that the buffer, unless you're using like germanium fuzz pedals, some kind of fuzz, or even a wah, where you might not like the wah low impedance. You really do want that directly connected to your guitar signal. But aside from that, you put a buffer up front immediately.
Yep.
And that's how I have it on my board.
Right.
I have an old buffer circuit that I had built into an AB box. So whether I'm on this guitar or that guitar,
you're still buffered. By
the time I come back out, it's buffered. You have just released a DB Plus.
Getting ready to August 1st.
Oh, but maybe by the time this podcast is out in the air.
Yes, that's true.
You will have already released.
That's true.
A DB Plus, which, so we're not letting the cat out of the bag, is a really cool little tool to go on the front of your board, and I think it should be on the front of everybody's board, where you can leave it as a buffer independently of whether or not the boost is turned on or off.
Yes. So there's a switch on the side that you press on if you want it to be a buffer. And then you can click the on and off switch and use it as a boost.
Right.
Or you can turn that buffer off and just use it as a boost.
Right.
So that way it doesn't mess with your fuzzes if you don't want it to.
Right. So that is awesome, because then you can even put the fuzz after it. And if there comes a time when you're going to use a fuzz for that gig or something,
right,
don't buffer it. Leave it unbuffered, and then it's off, and then your guitar signal hits the fuzz right there.
Right.
You can set it for unity gain, so that when you turn it on, now it's buffered.
Right.
And you turn it off, and now it's a straight pass-through to your fuzz. But if the fuzz isn't really a thing, then put the buffer on. It's always on, and you hitting the switch determines whether or not you're engaging that gain boost.
Right.
So you could boost it, or not.
Right.
To whatever level. I think that's a brilliant design for a buffer pedal up front. And if the last pedal in your chain, like you said, is already pretty low impedance, you don't necessarily need a buffer at the end, because that is a buffer. It's like whatever that last pedal was. If you're coming out of there low impedance, you don't necessarily need another one to drive the next longer amount of cable.
Right.
You might notice a difference. And maybe that difference is partially dependent upon what's at the other end of that 100-foot cable. I don't know what's on the other end. Maybe it's an amp that has a low impedance, loading, up front.
Right.
I don't know what your next thing is. Maybe it's a rack piece, and then the first thing on there is a bunch of pedals that are in a rack drawer.
Right.
I don't know. So I don't want to say don't have a second buffer. And luckily, your new DB Plus is priced quite right, so you could kind of popcorn that thing.
And it's small.
It's small, yeah. So you could decide to put it anywhere you want. For me, the reason to have one of those at the front and the back is to have the boost feature on the back. Because now it's like that's after all your gain and everything, and you can be like, you know what, I just need a little more volume.
That's why I usually like it myself.
Yeah.
Just a little bit of volume boost for my leads. So when I put my foot on top of the monitor and my mullet's flipping in the wind,
Yeah, you can really cut through the mix.
I really
really
did
sound.
used to have an awesome mullet when I was in high school.
Oh no! And Bob, please
On the
tell me-
screen.
please tell me we can put it on the screen.
We can put it on the screen.
Okay.
I have that ability. Me alone.
Fantastic! Bam! Wonder Twins activate. Yeah, and my all of my old photos have been sealed in a vault right next to the Ark of the Covenant from Raiders of the Lost Ark. So, top men are working on analyzing the photographs of my haircuts in and throughout my adolescence. The government's top men. And that's all you need to know.
And it's critical to our
and those
security.
really, they should not surface.
All right, so here's a quick easy one. Actually, we pretty much just touched on this.
Yay.
From Robert Hunter, I have a 1961 Tremolux.
Yep.
Is apparently a 4 ohm output. Can I use an 8 ohm speaker in that amp?
And we've said yes.
Yes.
You might like a 4 better. I don't know. You got to experiment,
Yeah. But you're not going to hurt it.
No, that's the right way you can go.
Right.
Yep.
Ryan Sylvester. This is a little bit more along the tech side. So Ryan Sylvester says IC versus transistor based dirt circuits. What are the advantages and differences for the player and or builder? So obviously I'm not going to go into too much trade secret. So
Right.
from the playing side, ICs can there's a different sound to them. ICs can be a little bit stiffer. They can be a little more not as reactive, I guess, for
Okay.
lack of a better word. Part of that's also what are your diodes at? Are they in between the inverting pins and and the feedback loop there, or are they going to ground? Are they soft clipping or hard clipping?
Right.
So if it's hard clipping, it's going to get some more almost like a not really compression like a compression pedal,
Pressure.
but it's
but like a hard limiting.
more hard limiting. Yeah.
So would you say then that is the kind of thing? It's that's more useful in creating the kinds of overdrives or distortions that people who like solid state amps distorting, like kind of I don't want to say shreddy, but like crunchy or whatever.
Yeah.
If they like that, I mean, like for example, Dimebag used to plug into solid state amps. He wasn't using a raging tube amplifier, and
Right.
so if you like that very linear, you know what I mean, kind of
very stiff and yeah.
yeah. If you like that militant distortion, then
Nice
maybe
word.
you're going after
You're probably going to want a hard clipping device. Of
a
some
hard
sort.
clipping device,
Yeah.
and maybe you're going to go into the ICs.
Right. Now, if I want something that's more along the lines of the whole the preamp tubes clipping, the power tubes clipping,
Right.
phase inverter doing a little bit of clipping,
Yeah.
transformer maybe even a little bit, speaker doing a little bit of clipping.
Yeah.
I'm going to start looking at FETs and MOSFETs and even
Boba the
NPNs and
Boba Fett's, right?
Boba Fett's, Luke Skywalker's, and all kinds
Yeah.
of stuff like that. So I mean, just because of the way they react, they're each gain stage is clipping a little bit more rather than dumping it through, making it go through diodes to hard limit it and clip off the signal in a different way.
Yeah.
So it's
And so that's that's your answer
It's different
for the
tools.
player
I mean, like,
and the builder. If
I
you're
can hit a nail in with a screwdriver.
Yeah.
But a hammer's easier.
Right.
You know.
Right.
And I can also turn a screw with like a coin.
Right.
But screwdriver's easier. So it just depends what you want to do.
Right.
You know.
Mhm.
What you like. So
And I think what I hear you saying is that some IC distortions should be used to drive nails.
Well, that's exactly what I was thinking.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I saw on the gear page a while back. There was the thread where someone was talking about these different pedals that are IC based, soft clipping devices.
Yeah.
So they're talking about tube screamers and a couple different models that are not tube screamers, but are like the Timmy, for example, which it has the diodes that are soft clipping, and they're complaining that they hear a little bit of the dry signal in there.
Yeah.
And so I was explaining, well, you're going to with that type of circuit.
Yeah.
You know, so if you tried all these pedals and you don't like them, the constant variable is the fact that that's the circuit that
Right.
they're using. So try something that's not that.
Right. Stop trying to get the best TS based,
Right.
overdrive then.
Right.
Just turn the page.
Right.
Expand your horizons.
Right.
Look to something different
Like
instead
a-
of being worried about whether or not they found some diodes in a bin somewhere from 1981.
Right. Like a Pinnacle or a Plexi Drive.
Bam.
That's what I'm talking about.
Boom.
Yeah. What these nerds said.
Yeah. Well, you like those pedals too, don't you?
Sure.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
I think you do.
Nerds.
Well, all right. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
All
We're
right.
the nerds.
Let's see
Hashtag
what we
nerd dead.
Okay, it looks like we got
All
time
right, so what do we got?
for let's do one more question.
Let's bang them out. Come on.
All right. This is I'm gonna save this one for you.
Okay.
'cause
All right. All right.
That
Okay,
one, that
okay,
one there
okay.
is not the bread and butter.
All
This
right.
is where you earn your money.
Yeah.
Andrew Biller.
Hi, Andrew.
So he didn't like the lavaliers, which we didn't either, which is why we got rid of
Oh,
them.
yeah.
So we changed that, obviously. He said, let's see. I guess. I gave you the wrong person. This is Kenny Carlisle.
Okay.
Okay.
But that's not his question, right?
That is his question, but
Okay.
I was
What
looking
up,
at the wrong
Kenny?
page. I'm
Got
sorry. We'll try to work that one in too.
Okay.
Kenny Carlisle says, I have two Fender American Tellys, one 2006 Standard, one 2011 Deluxe Nashville Beatbender. Both have the Deluxe style individual bridge saddles. I've always liked the ability to intonate the bridges due to the individual saddles, but I've heard a lot about the difference that brass saddles make in terms of tone. I know
And by brass, we're assuming he now means 1, 2, 3. Just
That's what I'm assuming, yeah.
Paired up.
right. I
Okay.
know there are some compensated 2-string saddles out there,
Yes.
but I really prefer the 6 individual saddles. I've seen some photos of individual brass saddles, but I have a hard time finding any of them that will work with my American Standard bridges. So, where can he get them? And what are
Okay.
your thoughts on that?
Okay. So, yeah, that's a two-parter. And so the first thing that I'll address is the material. So, if you have whatever the bridge is, the material is going to affect the sound.
Right.
And that's just the way it is. Titanium, brass, steels, zincs,
Plastic.
just pot metal, Graph Tech, lubricated saddles and plastic and Delrin and stuff. I mean, I had the pleasure of working on Angus Young's number 1 and number 2 guitar.
Not that you're dropping any names
And,
or
Let me
anything.
pick that up for
No,
you. You
I
should,
had-
drop the.
I'm saying I had the pleasure of working on them. It's me, Frank Falbo. That's the name
I had
I'm
the pleasure.
dropping.
Nobody else, not you peons.
Right.
Frank
I'm
Falbo.
better than you.
And this is why.
Right. It is important that I bring up his name because of the non-standard thing I'm about to say.
Oh, okay.
So, he likes the plastic saddles on the SGs. If you look, you'll see like white ones. And we had to do a bunch of work on his other guitar to make it sound more like this one. And it wasn't just changing the pickups. It was like everything about that guitar was different. The wood reacted differently. All this stuff was different. And without getting into all the details,
Right.
one of the things that I changed on the second guitar to make it sound more like the first one was that I used what was one of the early prototypes of a Graph Tech's Resomax bridge, which has like a
Max.
synthetic, resonant max.
Named after you.
So it has
Oh.
like there's like metal in it, I think, but it's got some resin. So it's kind of like this hybrid thing.
Right.
But talk about like the differences that saddles can make. It's a huge difference. And for whatever reason, like one of his edicts was, no, I don't want metal saddles. And so that came into play. That along with a bunch of other things that we did to the guitar to make it, to make the second guitar sound more like the first one. Because he played the first one, if he broke a string, he would switch to the second one, and after that song, he would hand it right back to the tech and go back to the first one.
Right.
By the time we were done, he would break a string on the first one, take the second guitar, and play it for at least like 7 or 8 songs, or finish the whole set out
Right.
with it. Because we had made them behave more like one another. And it wasn't a matter of just having the same saddles on each
Right.
one. It was changing the saddles
Way more at play there.
to be different on purpose to then try to get these two things to be more like one another.
Right.
So saddle material is totally important. So the first thing is the brass. If you think you like brass, unfortunately, I can't tell you who's going to cut those for you. Your Google search is as good as mine.
I don't know if there's any on Stu Mac or anything like that or not.
Yeah, I just don't know. Now, you might be able to find some that are plated, where you know that the material underneath is brass, but maybe it's not immediately clear to you that it is brass because they just sell it as a chrome bridge or chrome saddles. But you do some digging around and you can find out, oh, those are brass in there, Oh, cool, I'll try those. And so if you do like the individual adjustments, but you want to hear what brass sounds like, then that's what you're going to have to do.
Right.
But in changing the entire bridge out for 3 doubles, then the first thing that's going to happen is that saddle is now married to the other string. So there's a coupling that's going on that's changing the sound. This is absent the discussion of what material we're using.
Right.
But the coupling, so like a 3-saddle telly bridge, even if all of the alloys were the same, is going to sound different than a 6-saddle telly bridge. Again, even if all the alloys between the two are the same. But of course, like brass 3 saddles, those are a dime a dozen. You can get tons of them that are intonated. Some of them are intonated by being tilted.
Right.
Some of them are intonated by having notches cut into them.
Right.
So that the string pivots across on a certain, part of the saddle.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, it's definitely different.
Right. Cool. All right. And now back to Andrew Biller's question.
Yeah.
Andrew.
A couple of podcasts ago, Travis had said
Right.
that if he needed to cover all the bases, he'd take a Telecaster. So why would that be? A Strat has more pickups, more pickup combinations, more knobs, a whammy bar. So how come a Telecaster covers more bases?
Right. And I'm going to stop you right there.
Sure.
So before Brian answers, I'll tell you he's wrong. And you can cover more bases with a Strat. But I didn't mean to interrupt you. What were you going to say?
No, he said, I guess Travis said that.
Travis said you can cover more bases with a Tele.
Telecaster. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would agree.
Ah.
A Telecaster does everything right.
So
I think Max is playing like an app.
yeah, you just zone it.
texting Travis right now.
Yeah.
I miss you so much. I'm falling asleep listening to these nerds go back
Oh
and
my
forth.
God.
It's like, so brass
Yeah.
is better than polyurethane.
Yeah.
Different.
Yeah.
Hashtag for those about the rack.
Yeah.
Yeah, nothing.
I can give you one of these. How about this?
You didn't do it right.
You don't have the hair though.
I didn't do it.
You don't have the hair.
Neither does he.
He doesn't now.
All right.
My real dad
That's why he
got that
quit.
right.
He got his hair cut and lost the magic.
Maybe.
I think that he just like, I got nothing anymore, guys.
Poor
Here's
guy. He's
mine.
not here. We love you, man. We love you.
I miss you.
So, yeah.
I miss everything about you.
But yeah, if you want to get to the nut and bolts of it, it's like, there's the Tele neck pickup, even though it's a little single coil, it's got that cover on it, which kind of muffles our sound a little bit.
I don't care for them. I like a different neck pickup on it. But
Yeah, but that's where some people are saying, like I've heard people play jazz on a Tele, so that's where you can kind of dummy up a humbuckery tone on a
Mason's
Tele.
got a nice humbucker in his Telecaster.
He
It's
does.
really
He's got the little mini, right?
Yep.
So yeah, if I had to take one guitar to the gig, I mean, it's a personal thing. If I'm taking one guitar, it's the Strat. Because you can't do the 2 and 4 position sounds
That's true.
with a Telecaster, unless it's a Nashville Telecaster, and then, of course, it's a whole different thing anyway.
Right.
So that's kind of me, but I think when you hear people say that, like, I'll just take a Tele, I can get everything done on a Tele, you can confirm that's for people who kind of they play a lot of Tele.
They're
So it's
preference is
become an
Telecaster.
extension of
Yeah.
of how they get their sounds.
Like for me, I can play a Stratocaster. I just prefer a Telecaster.
Yeah.
It's just that's the sound I like.
But then does that mean that, like, if you were, let's say you're in a cover band and you got to play a lot of different sounds,
Right.
are you still preferring the Tele and then just doing it with some pedals and
I mean, I used to play in more cover bands than I do now, but yeah, I would take a couple guitars. I'd take a Strat, Les Paul, and a Telecaster.
yeah. So you wouldn't try to jack of all trades the Tele.
No,
Yeah.
No, I would switch guitars, but part of that's the dork in me. So I got 4 amps in back.
Right.
You know, I've got a pedal board that's bigger than this table.
Yeah.
And I'm playing at the VFW for 10 people.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And the drummer's like, get your amps off the stage. I got nowhere to set my drums up. I'm like, get on the floor, buddy.
Yeah.
Get the drums on the floor. I have to have 2 full stacks next to each other and
Right.
a twin
Right.
and an AC30
Right.
just to make sure I
Right.
can
Do
cover
you
the
have
bases.
any idea how hard it is to cover all these sounds?
Exactly.
You know?
And you can't expect me to just play a gig on 1 amp.
Right.
You know?
Right. Right. With drummers, it's different because it's just
Right.
bing, bang, 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 bang,
It's just
blah, blah,
a
blah.
bunch
They
of
just-
noise.
Yeah, they're just
First
banging
world
away
problems.
like monkeys. You know what I mean? What do they know? You know,
Well,
like, oh, I'd like to take 3 different snares. Whatever.
Yeah, no one cares about your snares.
They all sound the same. They're not fooling anybody.
Right. You just keep trying to play over me, dude. I'll turn up.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the real truth. It's so that you do not, as you, Mr. Drummer, don't have all the power in this relationship. Right?
And that's how every drummer stopped listening to our podcast.
Right. Yeah. Sorry, guys. I don't know how many drummers we had listening, but
Probably not, since the only pedals they use are the
yeah,
hi-hats.
I think
true. Can they
Robert
spell
Hunter is the
chasing
only drummer
tone
that listens to this.
on the keyboard? Do you think the drummers are able to even type that in?
I don't know.
Or is it just more like, blah, 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 oh, I'm angry now?
That's
know?
a good question.
Just
Right.
a monkey with a rock.
Right. Chasing Tone podcast. Poking at the screen. Chasing Tone. Brian. I want to see my friend Brian. This poor guy.
So if you get mad about what Frank's saying, email Max at wamplerpedals.com.
We've already got rid of one guy. We can get rid of another one. I've seen them do it.
Yeah.
I'm
well,
probably
the beauty
next.
is I live 2,000 miles away, so you know I may not be around for all of these. Just like you know the dad that you never see, right? You know, may not be around for all the holidays, son, but I still love you.
Yeah.
And I'll prove it by never talking to you and then sending you a train set and Christmas.
That's all I can ever ask for.
All right. So if you have any other questions, if you have any
Right.
questions
Or daddy issues.
daddy issues, if you're watching YouTube, post in the comments below. If you're on Facebook, post in the comments below. If you're listening in your car, stop right now. Stop on the side of the road. Pull over. Call the office.
Yeah. and complain.
765-352-8626. Or email from your phone, Max
Right.
at wamplerpedals.com.
Right.
Or podcast at wamplerpedals.com.
And if you are driving and sending a text, at least film it.
Exactly.
You know, have the camera running so
Right.
that they can be on one of those blooper
Yep.
reels of the car flipping over.
Yeah.
You know,
So here's the
don't
thing.
text and drive.
Snapchat.
Yeah.
Here's the thing: the show's free. So once you hit that like button once or twice,
Yeah.
come on.
And for the
Come on.
for the three of
press
you
the
that are
mission.
going to
the
thumbs
like button.
down it,
Yeah.
you're welcome.
Yeah.
So, all right, wamplerpedals.com/blog for Max's
See ya.
awesomeness.
Oh yeah.
And let's see.
For Brian and Max.
Yeah.
And Bojo, I'm Frank, and we're saying we'll see you next time.
See ya.
Deuces.